logical consequences of the election of Barack Obama to the office of the presidency is the widespread assumption that the very last barrier in the quest for racial justice has been overcome. If a black person can be elected to the president, then anything is possible. Now, in reading Anand Teltumbe's, is that how you pronounce his last name? A book on the persistence of caste, which Anand sent me in the US. It's a fascinating analysis of the Karlanji murders. I realized how much we in the US can learn from the struggle of the Dalit people, and especially how easy it is to incorporate representatives, so-called representatives of subjugated people into hierarchies of power without any fundamental change taking place among masses of people. As many people in the US point out, one black man in the White House does not change the fact that there are over 1 million black men in the big house. And the big house, of course, is the prison. The increasing presence of black people in the highest rungs of economic and political power, as well as in popular culture and media, has resulted in the erasure of issues of economic and racial justice by a kind of hyper-presence of black people in the culture today. Now, how do we address the assumption that we've reached the mountaintop, as Martin Luther King said? I find it interesting that he never told us what he saw when he got there. So I have serious questions about our having already reached the mountaintop. As you probably know, the successful campaign to treat Dr. King's birthday as a national holiday, which is really important. I don't want to underestimate the significance of that political struggle. But at the same time, what most people know about Dr. Martin Luther King is that he had a dream. And then many people assume that, this is, and you see this slogan everywhere, that we are now living the dream. Now, I want to spend a few moments talking about the limitations of the civil rights paradigm. One of the major challenges in the contemporary quest for social justice is to recognize these limitations of civil rights, or the civil rights paradigm. Because the quest for racial equality in the 20th century came to be considered synonymous with the struggle for legal rights, and one might make some comparisons with the struggle for gender equality, which was enacted within the legal sphere. Many dimensions of the struggle for freedom were dismissed. And I like to point out that those of us who were active in the movement back then, in the 50s and the 60s, even though the campaign did focus on the right to take public transportation, the Montgomery bus boycott, for example, focused on voting rights, that is to say legal rights, that is to say civil rights, even though those were the expressions of the movement at that time, people did not conceptualize it as simply a campaign to be directed toward the legal realm, not simply a civil rights movement. As a matter of fact, people called it the freedom movement. People didn't even call it the civil rights movement. They called it the freedom movement. And so one might assume from that, yes, we have to fight for civil rights, but then there's also economic justice. And there are also a whole range of issues that cannot be contained within the legal sphere and within legal discourse. Martin Luther King was assassinated precisely at the moment when his notion of mass struggles and mass campaigns were shifting from civil rights to economic rights. As a matter of fact, as you know, he was killed in Memphis, Tennessee, where he had gone in order to participate in a sanitation workers' strike. He was there to march with the garbage men, and they were men, and continue to be men. I haven't seen a woman sanitation worker. I don't know, that might be very different in this country, where I know that sanitation work is work that is generally relegated to Dalit people. And reflecting on contemporary quests for social justice inside the United States, it is important, I think, to simultaneously acknowledge the limitations of civil rights. That is to say, there are many goals and aspirations that reside outside of the framework of civil rights. It's important to simultaneously acknowledge those limitations and to acknowledge the continued denial of civil rights to communities. And sometimes these are communities that are not historically associated with the civil rights movement. One of the problems we face in the US is that civil rights are considered to be synonymous with Black people. And so it becomes more difficult to use what is, as I was saying, a limited strategy, but nonetheless important, significant strategy to fight for civil rights for other communities. Now, and it's this latter question that I want to briefly explore. And civil rights. Conservative forces since the 1980s have argued that as a result of affirmative action programs, white people, especially white men, are those whose civil rights need defending in the contemporary era. Affirmative action is represented as an assault on the rights of white men. And a number of states, including California where I live, have already declared affirmative action programs illegal on the basis that they constitute discrimination against white people. And I know that there is a debate here in this country about the reservation system. Am I right? And it would be very interesting for us to share experiences and successful and perhaps not so successful strategies in that sense. But before I gesture towards communities whose civil rights should be emphasized in the 21st century and strongly defended, let me say a few words about the contradictions. I've been talking about